Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So if you haven't seen my last few videos, I'm recording this on my cell phone because recently my PC died and I'm working on getting a replacement, but I have not yet managed to do that. Okay, so bear with me until then, because I can't edit and the quality's not as good, obviously. All right, so today I wanted to talk about leading raids. It's something that I've done a lot of, so I thought I would give my thoughts on the topic and some tips for you all who maybe want to dip your toe into actually leading some raids. The first thing I will say is that raid leaders in DDO are very much needed. DDO traditionally, not just raiding but also groups, has been a game of a lot of followers but few leaders. I think some of that is due to a lot of people who are antisocial. I'm one of those. Tend to play DDO. A lot of people just don't want to, or a lot of people just don't want to take on the additional stress or work of leading a raid, because you do have to be a little bit more knowledgeable and you do have to deal with a little bit of stress at times. But I can tell you it's fun, it's worth it, and if you're interested in doing that, it's very helpful to the community because, again, we need people to step up into leadership roles. If no one leads, then groups just don't form and people get frustrated because there's no one to play with. All right, so I guess the first thing I would say after that is that raids in DDO are not like raids in other games. Like, some other games have super long, super complicated raids, but DDO raids are really not that hard. They're not very difficult to learn. There's tons and tons of raid guides out there, and there's so many raids that are very simple. Things like VOD, Vision of Destruction, or Dryad and the Demigod. Things like this are really not very complicated and really might have as little as one role or no roles really that you have to assign and learn. So, and there's other raids where it's mostly just DPS stuff. There certainly are some raids that are a little bit more complicated. Things like, say, like Strahd, for example. But in general, DDO and even raids like Strahd really are not that difficult to learn. I even need to learn a little bit more on Strahd myself. I want to start leading that one personally. But there are resources available, so don't get too bogged down. I see a lot of people in game who will just write out raiding entirely, and I've never really understood this. Not just leading, but also just playing raids. People might tend to think of raiding as being this big, difficult, complex thing, but it's really not. It's just maybe slightly more complicated than a regular quest. So don't be nervous about dipping your toe in the water when it comes to leading. I will say, for any raid you want to lead, you should do your best to learn it beforehand. As I said before, there are a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of raid guides written up. If you just Google it, you'll find a lot on the DDO forums. I've done a bunch of raid guides, like short 6-minute raid guides. Recently, I think I have 3 or 4 of them. There's other YouTubers, people like Voodoo Spies, who've done long form teaching raids you can look at. So there's a lot of resources. There's also the DDO wiki, obviously. So there's a lot of resources if you want to start leading raids. Just go in and read the raid. You should try to have an understanding, a deep understanding if you can, but at least a basic understanding of the raid. I'll say also that it's okay not to know everything and still lead a raid. You can, if you just, even if you know nothing, you can put in the LFM when you start a raid as a raid leader to say, post the LFM, say whatever difficulty, normal, hard, whatever, and just say, hey, I don't know the raid, looking for people to help me. Or just put in the LFM, I don't know the raid, but I want to play it. And that will set the expectation to players who want to join, not that they have to expect a little bit of a learning run. Where you'll get in trouble is if you don't know a raid as a raid leader, you start to lead it and you don't let people know. So either put it in the LFM if you don't know the raid at all, or you only have a minor understanding of it, or just tell people through voice chat or text chat, whatever, right when they join, definitely before the raid starts, so they know what they're getting into. Just make sure the expectations of people who join your group are in alignment. Okay, next thing I would say is, as the raid leader, don't be indecisive. If you're leading the raid, you are the decider. You make the final decision. It's your decision what difficulty they run, who performs what roles. If you go for optionals or not, you have to make the final decision. Don't be indecisive and say, oh, what do you guys want to do? I mean, it's okay to get some group input, but after you get that input, you have to make the decision. Okay, so don't be indecisive. Even if you maybe make decisions that aren't optimal. Maybe you don't, I don't know, maybe you do something, maybe run an optional, or maybe you take a path in Deathworm or something that's not optimal. It doesn't, towards completion, that doesn't really matter. What matters most is that you are making the decisions as a raid leader, and if people don't want to join your raids in the future, they could choose to do that. They don't like the way you're leading, but at the end of the day, I think 99% of people will just appreciate that you are making a decision, even if it's not necessarily the most optimal way to raid. Like, for example, in Baba's Hut, I might tell people we're going to bring the mobs down, even if the group is capable of just going straight and DPSing all the way through without taking down the mobs in the last part of Baba. People don't really care. I always go with mounds because it's just kill the mounds because it's easier. But people won't really care generally that you may not do the most efficient thing or lead the raid in the most efficient way. What they really care about, and what I would emphasize, is just make a decision, just be decisive, and just pick something. Okay, the next thing I have on my notes here, by the way, I'm looking at notes on the left side of me here, which is why I'm looking left. But another tip you might want to keep in mind, raid at regular times, particularly like some of the best times if you can do this. I think that most populated, from my experience, the servers tend to be most populated for raiding, say like late afternoon to early evening Eastern time on Saturdays. I think that's probably the most optimal time. Probably the worst time. The worst time is obviously like nighttime, in the middle of the night in Eastern time. So if you're on the other part of the world, it can be tough to raid. But it's kind of just is what it is. Most players are in America. But yeah, if you can raid at times where there's more people available, especially if you're pugging, that can be to your advantage. But another thing to keep in mind is that you want to raid, if you can, try to raid at regular times, so the same times every week. Because particularly if you're pugging, people will recognize that and they'll learn that and they'll know when to expect your LFMs, and it'll be easier to fill. You'll start to see people join regularly. Like, well, my PC is currently dead, but what I have been doing is trying to raid every Saturday, like on Twitch or just on Atlantis. For me, I've been trying to lead raids like every afternoon, like late afternoon, early evening on Saturdays, throughout the night Saturdays, and I've seen a lot of the same people join. I mean, some of that's because I have a channel and people will see me on Twitch and stuff, but a lot of that also, even if like I wasn't streaming, people would just see that LFM regularly and join more often. So that's good. At tip on filling is just run at the same times. People will get in the know in terms of your schedule. Okay, let's see. Another thing you want to do is, as a leader, before you start the raid, always ask if anyone's new or has questions. There are not a lot of raids, but there are some raids where if someone doesn't know what they're doing at all, they can screw up the raid. So, for example, like someone in Baba's Hut, for example, who continually drags the skeletons over the puzzle, or the scarecrows over the puzzle. Things like that can mess up. One person not knowing what they're doing can mess up the raid. So always ask and be willing to explain the raid or ask or answer any questions. I think that's just a good general thing to avoid any complications in the raid. Always ask if anyone has questions. It's just a good thing to do. It's also friendly. People appreciate that. Helps the run go smoother. Next thing, make sure you assign people to roles. Again, you are the decider, so you need to assign people to roles. Don't be indecisive. Don't say like, hey, who wants to do this? And never tell someone to do it. Like if the best case scenario is if you ask people, first thing I would do when you get your group formed or while it's forming, just ask, hey, who would like to tank? Who wants to be the healer or whatever, who can heal, whatever the role is in the particular raid, ask. Most of the time, people will volunteer. If you don't get a volunteer, like no one wants to volunteer to tank, the next step I would say is to start PMing people who appear like they can fill the role. Like for a tank, for example, if a fighter joins your group and they have 3,000 hit points, they can probably tank. If there's a healer, depending on the difficulty, of course, but if there's no tank, you may need to, for example, just even as he's like a DPS fighter, ask him to tank. And if it comes down to it, if you still can't get anyone after you ask, then the next thing, you'll just need to tell people what to do. Like you'll message that fighter and say, hey, I need you to tank. And 99% of the time they're like, okay, my build is not the best, but I'll give it a shot. I don't think I've ever run into someone who said, no, I'm not doing that. If I ask them to do a role, they'll at least try. And it's okay if they don't do a great job, as long as they're just trying. You may need to drop the difficulty if you can't can't get a tank or something for, say, like the new Isle of Dread raid or something. But it's okay. But you will need to just tell people what role to do, and before the raid starts, make sure all your roles are filled. Okay, the next thing I would say is use voice chat. If you're pugging, you'll need to use the in-game voice chat a lot. Obviously, it's not the best, it's not the greatest, but it's good enough. I know Discord is better, but it's just not feasible if you're pugging, leading pug raids to use Discord, because it's just not reasonable to expect everyone in your pug, everyone who joins, every new person to join your Discord group and to join the chat. It's just not something that's feasible. So you're going to need to use in-game chat. Obviously, if you're doing guild runs, you're not pugging, then obviously Discord is better. It's just better than in-game chat. In-game chat has a variety of bugs that are still there. A lot of times I'll have difficulty hearing people if they're not on the best mic or they don't have their settings configured properly. Let's see. And I would say, I know some people have anxiety. Like, I personally have some anxiety issues as well. But you really, if you're going to lead raids, I would strongly recommend you use voice chat and not just rely on text chat. It's just not feasible in the heat of a moment to use text chat. For example, like in the new Isle of Dread raid, when you need to call out roar for the dinosaur, it's a lot of times it's just too difficult to type in chat, especially if you're already involved in, say, like healing people, which I'm doing a lot, or whatever. It's just the heat of the moment. It's just really difficult to type stuff in. And if you have to explain the raid through text, you're going to be typing novels in the text chat. You just don't want to do that. I know, like I said before, I know a lot of people will get a little anxious or shy and don't want to use voice chat for that reason. But I would urge you, just give it a shot. The best way, in my personal experience as someone who has social anxiety, the best way to get over that is just to force yourself to do it. And over time, you'll be more and more desensitized to it. Like, I was really nervous about leading raids at first, but the more I did it, the more I talked through voice chat, the easier and easier it became. I think the only way to conquer these types of things, I'm not trying to get in depth into psychology, but my personal experience, my opinion, the best way to solve that kind of problem is just to force yourself to do it. And it will be uncomfortable at first, but over time you'll desensitize yourself to it. Like, that's been my experience with a lot of things, like Twitch streaming. I was super nervous, but the more I did it, the more comfortable I got with it. All right, the next thing for voice chat, make sure you have a decent headset or standalone mic. It doesn't have to be super expensive. It can be just a $30, $40 mic, $30, $40 headset. Just have something decent. Don't use a built-in laptop mic. Like, you need to have something, either a headset with a mic on it or a standalone mic. Just needs to be something where people can hear you, especially if you're going to be leading raids. People need to be able to hear you clearly, so make sure that you have a good mic and that your mic settings are configured properly within the game. There is a way in the settings, if you're not aware, in the audio settings in the game, to test out the quality of your audio. So you can test all that out before you lead raids, so it should be good. Alright, so let's talk about difficulty. Again, as the leader, you're going to be deciding the difficulty. If you are pugging, in my experience, most pugs can handle the newest in-game raids. We're talking the newest in-game raids at anywhere from normal to R1, but over that is just not reachable, and oftentimes R1 is not reachable. Typically, hard is where you're going to be at if you're pugging. That's really all you can expect from pugs. In my experience, it's rare. I mean, sometimes you'll get a great group. It just depends on luck who you get in the pug, and you can push some skulls a little bit, run like R1 or something, but generally you're going to need to be sticking to hard in pugs. If you want to run higher difficulties than that, then you're going to need to organize people outside of the game or in your guild, get a group of elite players together at a specific time, because you can't go into leading pug raids expecting pugs to do more than they're capable of. Like, you have to be reasonable with the general population and what people's characters are able to do. I mean, most time you're not going to get min-max characters in every slot in every group. Usually, like, half your group might be made up of new players, first like characters who don't have any good gear. You just don't know what you're going to get, and you're very rarely going to get a super good group that can really push skulls. So be aware of that. Just have a good expectation of what the groups can actually handle, and don't be, as a raid leader, get frustrated or try to push the difficulty too hard when the group's not capable of it, because it results in a bad experience for everyone. And again, if you want to push, pug raiding is not for pushing skulls. If you want to push skulls, you need to organize that outside of game. You're going to have to set requirements for people in your group, and that's just not something you can do within a pug scenario. And it's cool if you want to do that. That's great. That's awesome. But you need to organize that outside of a pug. The next thing is be friendly. This is common sense, but you want to create a positive atmosphere. It's the best thing to do if you want to make sure everyone has a good time and people come back. Don't get too hung on like if you're gonna wipe or not. Don't get too frustrated on wipes. Don't get too frustrated with people in the group. Don't try not to be angry, emotional, these types of things over voice chat. It's just not good. Just try to be positive and friendly. One a couple great things you can do is every time someone joins your groups, just say hello or welcome. Every time that's really helpful, and it just sets a positive, friendly vibe. And say thank you if someone joins and they join you for a raid or two and then leave to say, hey dude, it was fun. See you next time. Just try to chat with people a bit. Okay, so another thing you can do as a raid leader is have a couple of, if you're going to lead raids regularly, try to have a couple of characters available, maybe at least more than one of different roles, because if you're pugging raids, sometimes you may not have a tank, you may not have a healer, and it's great to be able to reach into your bag of characters and pull out whatever role you don't need. So right now I have a healer character, I have a DPS character. I want to get to the point where I have a crowd control character. It's just nice to be able to adjust to whatever your group is lacking. And sometimes you'll get someone in your group that will do that for you, but as a raid leader, it's nice to be able to do that. Like having my healer, I can always pull that out because that can be an issue, is getting a healer. So if you have maybe two characters, you don't have to have like one of every role, but it is helpful. In addition to just having one alt in game is just great for a variety of other reasons, like farming, for example, or just avoiding having to use raid bypass timers. But it's great to have, like, say, a tank in a CC, or like a DPS in a CC, or a tank in a DPS, or healer in DPS. Whatever you have, it's good to have just at least, if you can have at least one more character that can perform a different role, it's pretty helpful. Okay, another thing you need to be aware of is people disconnecting. It happens every once in a while, and it's a bit of a balancing act, because you want to be nice to that person that disconnected and give them a decent amount of time to come back. I mean, a lot of times, you know how DDO is. People can just get DC'd for no reason. But you also can't let the group wait too long. It's also not nice to make the other 11 people wait too much. So I wouldn't give the person more than, like, say, 5 minutes to try and come back, because you just can't have groups waiting for 10 minutes. It's just, I understand that you want to be nice to the person that DC'd, but you also have to be respectful of the other 10 people's time in your group. Okay, another thing you can do is you can consider, if you are raiding at regular times, another good thing to do is you can go on the various social media, or just media areas, like the DDO.com forums is probably the best one, but also DDO Reddit, DDO Discord, any other place. There's probably some I haven't mentioned or not thinking of, but you can go to those places to advertise your raid times, and you'll be surprised at how many people will choose to join you, or will see that and join up. So do that. Take advantages of those things. There's really no reason not to if you're worried about filling and you are raiding at regular time. Just go on the DDO forums, Reddit, Discord, whatever, and let people know. Okay, guys, I think that's all for this topic. Let me know if you have any other questions. I'll try to answer in the comments, or if you have anything that you'd like to point out that I didn't mention, or if you disagree with me on any of this. I would be interested in reading your comments, as always. Finally, I'd like to thank my patrons, Jordan Bloom, Robert Ray, Vovclav Snyder, Brent Erickson, Ryan Alsey, Rouge Rogue, and Clorox. Thank you all so much for your support. Also, for anyone else who wants to support me, I'll put links below in the description for all that stuff. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one. Take care.